Hello everyone, this is Kim Lay with A2Q2, and in this video I'll review with you the typical activities that are needed for a company that is preparing to be public or doing a public company readiness initiative for the equity stock administration process. And so this applies to stock options, restricted stock units, and types of equity grants or awards that you would give out to employees or to non-employees. And so on screen, what you see here is your what we call ESA, just for ease, the acronym is ESA. And we're showing you the process and the typical sub-processes. So the typical sub-processes that you would want to cover in this is going to be your stock plan approval, your new employee grants, non-employee grants, also your annual grants, what's also known as refresher grants, equity exercises. So when employees or consultants exercise those options, grants, or other types of forms of equity compensation. There's the cancellation of those shares. There's recording of the stock-based compensation, account reconciliation, and very often most companies outsource this or use a tool like Equity Edge, Carta, or ShareWorks, in which case you're going to want to look at who has access to the program and also review of the SOC 1 Type 2 reports. And so I have a separate video on SOC 1 reviews and also segregation of duties and system administration. So those are the typical sub-processes. Now, what do we do with these sub-processes? We typically are assessing the control gaps. So for each of these, looking at what the current process is, what are the typical controls that are needed, looking at the risk for that particular process and in relation to your company and how it works. Typically in a readiness, it's going to be a documentation. And here documentation, historically, a lot of companies have leaned more towards narratives. Within the last 2 to 3 years, we have seen overwhelmingly Big Four auditors asking instead for flowcharts. And the flowcharts show from the start, the initiation of a transaction, all the way to the end of recording it, reporting it, disclosing it. And the typical output then is either, as I mentioned, flowcharts or narratives. The literature does not require one form or another. The literature for the PCAOB under AS5 just says that the company documents it. So as a company, you have flexibility. Although what we would recommend is to mirror as close to as possible to what your external auditors are looking for, so that it reduces the amount of rework you might have to do, the number of questions that they're asking, and in some cases reducing your fees as well when you are a public company. Now, as a non-public company, someone preparing or a company preparing for it, we typically see companies also create a risk control matrix. The short acronym for it is also known as RCM. Then conducting a walkthrough is fairly typical, and we would definitely recommend it, although it's not required. It's also sometimes called test of design, or TOE. And this is where, when we or anyone is documenting a process, often people tell you what they think happens. A walkthrough really helps you solidify it, because a walkthrough, you're literally saying, show me an example of how you initiate this transaction. Next, show me how you summarize and record it, who reviews it, who approves it, and actually showing these documents forces both the person doing it and the person asking about it to really think, is this needed, and did I really do what I intended the control to say? And then finally, testing of these controls is definitely optional, because you're a private company, and typically also known as test of effectiveness. So these are the types of activities, and now you can also see for the sub-processes or the activities to cover. And that's it. Thank you so much for your time.